Everyone in the city knew her name, but no one had ever heard her voice. The CEO's daughter, silent since birth, watched life from behind cold, glass walls. Doctors failed. Therapists gave up. Until one rainy afternoon, a boy from the flower shop down the street walked in. He didn't bring medicine. He didn't ask questions. He only placed one simple gift in her hands. And for the first time in her life, she spoke. It was a Tuesday morning in the heart of the city. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of rain. Down on the bustling main street, people rushed to work, umbrellas in hand. But on the top floor of the tallest glass building, time felt different. It was quiet. Too quiet. That was where she lived. Isla, the CEO's only daughter. 19 years old, yet she had never spoken a word. Her world was made of silent gestures, small nods, and unspoken thoughts. Some called her mysterious. Others pitied her. But for her father, Richard Cole, a man of steel in the corporate world, she was his most fragile treasure. Isla spent most days by the wide floor-to-ceiling window in her room, looking down at the streets. She would watch strangers pass, their lives loud and full of motion. Her own life was still. Her father had tried everything, speech therapists, psychologists, even world-renowned specialists. Nothing worked. The doctors called it selective mutism, but Isla's silence felt deeper than any diagnosis. That morning, Richard was late for work. He kissed his daughter's forehead before leaving, a habit since she was a child. "You'll be okay, princess?" he asked, though he knew she wouldn't answer. She simply nodded. The rain began just after he left. It blurred the city into soft shapes, making the world outside look like a watercolor painting. Isla pressed her hand to the cold glass, and then something caught her eye. Across the street, just beyond the awning of a small, worn-out flower shop, a boy stood arranging buckets of roses. He wasn't much older than her, maybe 21. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and his hair was messy in a way. That didn't look careless, more like the wind had claimed it. From where she stood, she could see him smile as he worked. Not the polite smile of city people, but something real, something warm. He looked up once, and for a brief moment, his eyes met hers through the rain-speckled glass. It was a fleeting connection, gone as quickly as it appeared. But for Isla, it felt like a spark. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why she kept watching him that morning. All she knew was that somehow, the boy with the flowers seemed brighter than the rest of the gray city. She didn't yet realize that in less than a week he would walk into her life and hand her something so simple, so ordinary, that it would shatter 19 years of silence in a single heartbeat. The next day, the rain hadn't stopped. It came down in soft, endless sheets,
turning the streets into glistening ribbons. From her window, Isla spotted him again. The florist's boy? He was out there early, carrying crates of daisies and tulips from a delivery truck. The flowers looked almost too bright against the dull sky splashes of yellow, white and pink in a gray world. She didn't know why she kept watching, but every time he moved, she followed. Around noon, her father had left for a meeting. The penthouse felt empty. Isla stood at the glass, chin resting on her palm, watching the boy tie a ribbon around a bouquet. Then something unexpected happened. He looked up again. This time he didn't glance away. He smiled. It wasn't just a polite smile. It was the kind of smile that felt like it belonged to her, even though they had never met. Isla's heart thudded. She didn't wave. She didn't even blink. But something inside her shifted. Minutes later, she saw him pick up a battered guitar from behind the shop counter. He stepped outside under the shop's awning and began to play. It wasn't a song she recognized, but it was soft, almost fragile, like it was meant for someone who had been waiting a long time to hear it. And then her fingers trembled. The melody, she knew it. It was buried deep in her memory, but it was there. She had heard it once, years ago, when she was a child. Her mother used to hum it to her before bedtime. A mother she hadn't seen in over 15 years. Isla's throat tightened. The boy played with his eyes closed, swaying slightly as if lost in his own little world. She didn't know how long she stood there, but she couldn't move. It felt like the rain, the music, and her heartbeat had all blended into one. Then, without warning, he stopped playing. slung the guitar over his shoulder, and began to cross the street heading straight toward her building. Isla's pulse quickened. What was he doing? The elevator ding echoed from the hallway outside her apartment door minutes later. A knock followed. Slow, deliberate. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Lane, answered. On the other side stood the florist boy, dripping wet, holding a single white lily wrapped in brown paper. This is for her, he said softly, nodding toward Isla's room. Mrs. Lane hesitated. From who? From someone who thought she might like the song, he replied. When Isla took the flower from Mrs. Lane's hands, she didn't know what to do with the rush of warmth in her chest. For 19 years, words had stayed locked behind her lips. But that night, as she lay in bed with the lily on her nightstand, she whispered, just one word, a name. The first word she had spoken in her entire life. The next morning, Isla woke before sunrise. The lily still sat on her nightstand, its petals curling slightly, but still holding on to its scent. She couldn't stop thinking about the boy's song, that haunting melody from her mother's voice, turning the streets into glistening ribbons. From her window, Isla spotted him again. The florist's boy? He was out there early, carrying crates of daisies and tulips from a delivery truck. The flowers looked almost too bright against the dull sky splashes of yellow, white and pink in a gray world. She didn't know why she kept watching, but every time he moved, she followed. Around noon, her father had left for a meeting. The penthouse felt empty. Isla stood at the glass, chin resting on her palm, watching the boy tie a ribbon around a bouquet. Then something unexpected happened. He looked up again. This time he didn't glance away. He smiled. It wasn't just a polite smile. It was the kind of smile that felt like it belonged to her, even though they had never met. Isla's heart thudded. She didn't wave. She didn't even blink. But something inside her shifted. Minutes later, she saw him pick up a battered guitar from behind the shop counter. He stepped outside under the shop's awning and began to play. It wasn't a song she recognized, but it was soft, almost fragile, like it was meant for someone who had been waiting a long time to hear it. And then her fingers trembled. The melody, she knew it. It was buried deep in her memory, but it was there. She had heard it once, years ago, when she was a child. Her mother used to hum it to her before bedtime. A mother she hadn't seen in over 15 years. Isla's throat tightened. The boy played with his eyes closed, swaying slightly as if lost in his own little world. She didn't know how long she stood there, but she couldn't move. It felt like the rain, the music, and her heartbeat had all blended into one. Then, without warning, he stopped playing, slung the guitar over his shoulder, and began to cross the street heading straight toward her building. Isla's pulse quickened. What was he doing? The elevator ding echoed from the hallway outside her apartment door minutes later. A knock followed. Slow, deliberate. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Lane, answered. On the other side stood the florist boy, dripping wet, holding a single white lily wrapped in brown paper. This is for her, he said softly, nodding toward Isla's room. Mrs. Lane hesitated. From who? From someone who thought she might like the song, he replied. When Isla took the flower from Mrs. Lane's hands, she didn't know what to do with the rush of warmth in her chest. For 19 years, words had stayed locked behind her lips. But that night, as she lay in bed with the lily on her nightstand, she whispered, just one word, a name. The first word she had spoken in her entire life. The next morning, Isla woke before sunrise. The lily still sat on her nightstand, its petals curling slightly, but still holding on to its scent. She couldn't stop thinking about the boy's song, that haunting melody from her mother's voice. The woman in the wheelchair was calling for him. Daniel, Daniel, let her in. Her voice cracked with urgency. He hesitated for a moment, then walked to the door and opened it just enough for Isla to step inside. The scent of flowers was thick in the air, sweet and dizzying. Every face in the room turned toward her. The woman's hands gripped the arms of her chair, so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes searched Isla's face like she was looking for something, She'd lost a lifetime ago. You've grown, she whispered. Her voice was full of tears. Isla didn't move closer. I think you've mistaken me for someone else, she said carefully. But the woman shook her head. No, I know you. Your name is Isla Morgan. Your mother's name was Claire? Isla's stomach twisted violently. Her mother's name. Her real mother's name, the one she never told strangers. How do you know that? Isla demanded. The boy Daniel moved subtly between them, like a barrier. She's confused, he said quickly. She gets things mixed up. She's not well. But the woman's voice was steady now. I remember the day they took you. Her words sliced through the room, silencing everything. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's enough, he said sharply. The woman reached for Isla's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. They told me you drowned, that there was nothing to bury. But I knew. I knew they lied. Isla pulled her hand back, her pulse racing. Who lied? The woman's eyes darted toward Daniel. For the first time, Isla saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of fear. But before the woman could speak, Daniel stepped forward, placing a hand on the wheelchair. That's enough, Ruth. His tone was no longer gentle. He began to wheel her away, but she twisted in her seat, still looking at Isla. They'll come for you too, she called out. Her voice rose, desperate. They'll come like they came for her. Daniel pushed her through a back door and out of sight. The room felt suddenly heavier. The scent of flowers now felt suffocating. Isla stood frozen, her mind roaring with questions. The boy's song, the woman's words, the way Daniel looked at her not like a stranger, but like someone who knew her already. Something told her. This was only the first warning. The rain had stopped by the time Isla stepped outside, but the air was heavy, thick with the smell of wet earth and crushed grass. Her mind replayed Ruth's words over and over. They told me you drowned. They lied. They'll come for you too. Isla wasn't sure what scared her more, what the woman had said, or the way Daniel had shut her up so quickly. She started toward the gate, her boots sinking into the muddy ground. But halfway down the narrow path, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Daniel stood in the doorway of the glass house, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't come here again, he said.
Maybe, or recognition. But it was gone just as quickly. You shouldn't have that, he said quietly. Why, because it's true? Isla shot back. Before he could answer, a voice drifted from deeper inside the glass house. It was faint, cracked, but unmistakably Ruth's. She's not supposed to be here. Daniel's expression hardened. Go home, Isla. If you stay, you'll end up just like... He stopped himself. Like who? She demanded. But before he could speak again, a loud crash echoed from the far corner of the glass house. Someone, had knocked over a row of pots. Daniel's head snapped toward the sound. When he turned back to her, his tone had changed entirely. You need to leave now. Isla hesitated, every instinct telling her not to turn her back. But then, just behind Daniel's shoulder, she caught sight of a figure. Small, thin, standing perfectly still among the plants. A boy, the same one she'd seen singing by the fence. Only this time his mouth wasn't moving, and his eyes were fixed entirely on her. For a moment, Isla couldn't move. The boy's stare was so unblinking, it felt like it pinned her to the spot. Daniel stepped sideways, blocking her view. Isla, out now. But the boy didn't move away. In fact, he stepped closer to Daniel, close enough that he should have brushed his arm. Yet Daniel didn't flinch. Didn't even look at him. Who is that? Isla demanded. Daniel's brow furrowed. Who? The air seemed to go cold. He's standing right behind you, Isla said, pointing. Her voice trembled despite her effort to keep it steady. Daniel turned, slowly. His eyes scanned the space. And then, with a calmness that chilled her, he said, There's no one there. But the boy was still standing in the same place. Closer now. Close enough for Isla to see the dirt on his hands, the faint mark on his neck that looked like a rope burn. She took a step toward him. Can you hear me? She asked. The boy's lips parted just slightly. And instead of singing, he whispered, "Don't let her go to the lake." Isla's heart skipped. "What lake?" she asked quickly. But before he could answer, Daniel's hand closed around her arm, hard. "Go home, Isla." His voice was low, urgent. "Forget the letter. Forget what you think you saw." She yanked her arm free, backing toward the gate. When she glanced over Daniel's shoulder one last time, the boy was gone. The wind outside had picked up to a howl, rattling the glass. As Isla stepped back onto the road, her pocket felt heavier, like the letter itself had gained weight. The words replayed in her mind. "You'll know what to do when you hear the song." Only now, she wasn't sure if the song was the warning or the trap. Isla didn't go home. Her hands were shaking as she walked, but her mind was sharper than ever. A lake. The boy had said lake. And Daniel's reaction, too quick, too forceful, meant he knew something. She ducked into the first cafe she found, the bell above the door jingling faintly. The air was thick with coffee and cinnamon, and a middle-aged woman behind the counter gave her a warm smile. "You're not from around here, are you?" Isla shook her head. "I'm looking for a lake." "Around here? Maybe out past the village?" The woman's smile faltered. Her hands, busy wiping the counter, froze for a split second. "There's no lake around here," she said. Voice too casual, too rehearsed. Isla pressed. "Not anymore, maybe? An old one? Something people used to visit?" The woman avoided her gaze, turning to adjust a stack of cups. "Best go home, dear. Roads get tricky after dark." It was only mid-afternoon. Isla ordered tea she didn't want, slid into a booth, and pulled out her phone. Her search for lake near Dunwick Village brought up nothing but fishing ponds and a dry reservoir. She was about to give up when an old, grainy blog post caught her eye, dated 12 years ago. "Tragedy at Bracken Lake, community in mourning." She clicked it. The article mentioned a child drowning. Details were sparse. No name, no cause. And then, almost as an afterthought, a line that made Isla's skin prickle. Following the incident, Bracken Lake was closed to the public. Access strictly prohibited. She scrolled for pictures, only to find that all the images were missing, replaced with little gray error icons. The bell over the cafe door jingled again. Isla didn't look up until a shadow fell over her table. It was Daniel. And he didn't look angry this time. He looked afraid. "You've been asking questions?" he said quietly. "You need to stop." "Bracken Lake isn't for outsiders." "Then tell me what it's for," Isla shot back. Her voice was low but steady. "Tell me why a boy I've never met told me not to let her go there." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake." Before she could reply, he reached into his coat pocket and slid something across the table. It was a small waterlogged photograph. The edges curled and blackened with age. The image was faded, but Isla could still make out the shape of a little girl in a white dress, standing by the shore of a lake. Isla stared at the photograph. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The girl's hair was long, tangled in the wind, and her bare feet were half buried in the mud. But it was the expression that froze her, a smile that didn't belong on a child. Too knowing, too still. Daniel slid into the booth across from her. His voice was a whisper. "She went into Bracken Lake. She never came out." Not the same anyway. Isla's throat was dry. "Who is she?" Daniel's gaze flicked to the cafe door, then back to her. "She was my sister." A beat. Her name was Lila. The name lodged in Isla's chest like a splinter. She didn't know why, but it felt familiar. She turned the photograph over, and her stomach twisted. Isla's hands trembled around the photograph. "I've never been here before," she whispered. Daniel's lips twitched into something between a grimace and pity. "Maybe not in this life." Daniel pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. It was worn soft with age, the creases nearly splitting apart. He laid it on the table. Names covered it in uneven rows, some in ink, some in pencil, some crossed out with heavy strokes. Her eyes darted to the middle. Isla Hart, 2009. Her own name, written years before she had even heard of Bracken Lake. "This is impossible," she whispered. Daniel shook his head slowly. "My sister's name was on it too. She vanished a week later." The cafe felt smaller, the chatter of distant voices, muted under the pounding in her ears. "Who keeps this list?" she managed to ask. Daniel's eyes flicked to the door, to the windows, to the people around them. It's passed down, always hidden, always guarded, by the ones who've survived the call. A gust of wind rattled the window glass. Isla caught her reflection in it. But for a heartbeat, it wasn't her face staring back. It was a pale girl, with dripping hair and hollow eyes. She blinked hard. The vision was gone. Her stomach rolled with nausea. "You need to leave," Daniel said sharply. "Tonight, before the festival, once the music starts—" He froze. His gaze locked on the cafe entrance. A woman stood there, wearing a long green coat, her hair dark and wet from the rain. She was smiling at Isla, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Daniel's grip on Isla's arm tightened. "That's her," he breathed. "The one who keeps the list." The woman in the green coat walked toward their table, her boots silent on the tile floor. Up close, Isla could see water droplets sliding down her hair, as if she had just emerged from the lake. But there was no lake for miles. She set a small tin box on the table between them. "Yours," she said softly. Isla didn't move. Daniel's hand trembled on the table, but he didn't touch the box either. The woman's smile was as fixed as porcelain. "Names must be kept," she said. "And yours was written?" "Long before you were born." She slid the box closer to Isla. "Inside is the song. When you hear it, you'll remember where you belong." Isla's pulse thundered in her ears. "I don't want it." The woman tilted her head. "That isn't for you to decide. The lake remembers. The lake waits." Daniel stood, pulling Isla to her feet. "We're leaving," he said. But the woman's voice followed them, like a shadow. "The festival begins at midnight. Whether you're here or there, the song will find you." They burst out into the rain, racing down the narrow street. Behind them, the cafe door swung shut. But Isla could swear she heard it, just under the sound of the rain. A melody, faint, familiar, and for the first time in years, Isla's lips parted, and she whispered the words,